Welcome to this explainer. If you've ever felt like your days are just rushing past you in this endless blur of notifications, to-do lists, and this lingering, heavy sense of isolation, well, you are definitely not alone. Today, we're diving into philosopher Byung-Chul Han's profound diagnosis of our modern exhaustion and looking at how the disappearance of shared rhythms is fundamentally altering human connection. So let's kick things off with a question that literally hits right at home for most of us. We have more tools for communication right now than any generation in human history, right? We can reach anyone, anywhere, instantly. Yet paradoxically, rates of loneliness and burnout are absolutely skyrocketing. We are hyper-connected for sure, but we feel completely empty. Why is that?
I think this quote perfectly captures the paradox of our time. As Byung-Chul Han points out, we are drowning in information but starving for genuine connection. We basically substitute real, messy, friction-filled human encounters with the frictionless accumulation of data. We mistake visibility for intimacy, and we mistake just having a contact for true closeness.
To really understand this emptiness, we first have to look at the environment we're operating in. Han calls our current era the achievement society. We live in this environment where the pressure to perform turns us into what he calls zombies of achievement. We are just exhausted by our own endless self-improvement, constantly optimizing our sleep, our hobbies, and even our relationships, all just to squeeze out a little more productivity.
Think about it like this. We've shifted away from the old disciplinary society where a boss or an institution dictated what you had to do with a firm "you must" into a world driven by "you can." We no longer need a boss to crack the whip because, well, we've internalized the whip ourselves. We exploit ourselves willingly under the guise of self-realization, and the result is a society suffering from profound burnout.
All right, moving into section 1, the disappearance of rituals.
It's not just our internal psychology that's changed. The very architecture of our time has collapsed. Han uses this incredibly evocative metaphor to explain that without shared traditions, time just becomes an erratic stream rushing right past us. Think about a house. It protects you, it gives you a place to rest. Rituals do the exact same thing for time. They create rooms and corridors in our lives, giving us places to pause and gather.
So the crucial takeaway here is that rituals aren't just, rigid, outdated traditions. They are the necessary techniques that make us feel at home in the world. They provide narrative closure. Think about coming-of-age ceremonies or weddings. They mark a definitive end to one chapter and the beginning of a new one. Without them, life is just this endless, exhausting blur of an eternal present. And look at what we've replaced them with. When we trade the sacred for the profane, holidays just become shopping events, right? Christmas is a retail season. Festivals become mere consumption opportunities. We lose the ability to truly linger in a moment. In a ritual, things are used and cherished. In consumerism, things, and actually scratch that, even relationships, are just consumed and quickly discarded. Let's jump to section 2, swarms over genuine community. This loss of shared rhythm directly feeds into the destruction of true community. Because without shared time and spaces, how can we possibly build a shared life? Han introduces a really fascinating concept here, the digital swarm. Instead of coming together, we sit alone behind our screens, acting as this explosive crowd of isolated individuals. A swarm makes a lot of noise, but it completely lacks the soul and solidarity of a real community. Notice the stark contrast here between the deep bonds we actually crave and the superficial metrics of digital success we settle for. Genuine community requires mutual obligation. It requires you to navigate disagreements and stay committed. The digital swarm? It requires absolutely nothing of you other than your momentary attention and your data. Because, think about it, the digital network preserves your autonomy by letting you instantly block, mute, or unfollow anyone. But in doing so, it completely destroys the vulnerability required for real love and friendship. We reduce other human beings to mere sources of validation, like an audience for a curated performance. We're communicating constantly, but honestly, we're terrified of real connection. Which brings us to section 3, erasing the mysterious other. Let's look at how this digital behavior fundamentally changes who we allow into our lives. Philosophy often talks about the other, that distinct, irreducible uniqueness of another person. True recognition means encountering someone's pure otherness, not just finding someone who echoes your own worldview back to you.
It requires the patience to be changed by someone you don't fully understand. Have you ever felt that the more we know about someone's digital footprint, the less we actually trust or understand them? Algorithms are literally designed to feed us what we already like, effectively erasing the other. We're served endless reflections of our own preferences, turning the entire world into a giant echo chamber where we never have to face anything truly challenging. So the bottom line is that by demanding total visibility and constant self-presentation, we strip away the sacred, protected spaces where genuine intimacy can actually flourish. Love and trust require a bit of mystery. They require a leap of faith. Total digital transparency doesn't create trust. It breeds paranoia, surveillance, and ultimately, a society staring into their own digital mirrors.
Finally, Section 4, Reclaiming the Contemplative Life.
So, how do we actually break free from the digital swarm? Well, spoiler alert, the antidote to our burnout isn't another productivity hack or a new mindfulness app that just helps you work harder. The radical solution is simply stopping. It's moving from a life of hyperactivity to the contemplative life. It means allowing yourself to experience deep boredom without instantly reaching for a screen to numb it. I absolutely love this perspective. We must carve out spaces of autonomous time that completely resist the neoliberal logic of efficiency and profit. Not everything needs to be optimized, monetized, or posted online. True freedom is doing something completely useless, playing, lingering, taking a walk just to walk. That is how you reclaim your time. By choosing depth over reach and lingering over rushing, we can begin to reconstruct the temporal architecture of our lives. We have to be willing to sit with the friction of real relationships, to embrace the silence that allows a genuine we to form. It requires the courage to be unproductive and the patience to just listen to each other again. Doing nothing is the ultimate rebellion in an age of endless scrolling. So I'll leave you with that thought. Thank you so much for joining this explainer, and I highly encourage you to log off now, leave the digital swarm behind, and just sit for a few minutes in quiet contemplation.
You know, usually when we talk about making a medical diagnosis, there is this very comforting expectation of precision.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
It's almost like mechanical engineering, right? Like if you fall and break your arm, you go to the hospital, they put you in front of an X-ray machine, and the resulting image shows you a stark, jagged white line across the bone.
Right. It's binary. It's undeniable. I mean, a fracture is a fracture, and the treatment protocol is standard.
Exactly. It's clean. But
Yeah.
then you step into the world of modern psychology or, a collective sociology, and suddenly that X-ray machine is broken.
Or rather, the machine works, but the image it produces is incredibly murky.
Yes, murky. We are looking at a diagnostic landscape today that completely defies easy categorization. When a whole society is suffering from a pervasive sense of exhaustion, how do you point to the jagged white line?
It is the absolute definition of diagnostic muddy waters. If diagnosing a single human mind is complex, trying to X-ray the psyche of an entire globalized, hyperconnected society is, well, it's an order of magnitude harder.
Right.
Because the symptoms are everywhere, but the underlying fracture is hidden.
Which brings us to the core of our conversation today. We are taking that exact diagnostic challenge head on. Our mission for this deep dive is to look at the X-ray of our modern world through the lens of a very specific, highly penetrating philosophical framework.
A fascinating one.
We are exploring the profound social critique of the philosopher Byung-Chul Han. His work is expansive, but today we are pulling primarily from the deep well of his books, specifically The Disappearance of Rituals, The Burnout Society in the Swarm, and The Agony of Eros.
And what we are looking for in this philosophical X-ray is an explanation for a very specific, very modern paradox. It's a paradox that almost everyone listening to this has likely felt in their bones.
The paradox being, why does modern life, despite being hyper-connected, despite being technologically seamless and absolutely obsessed with productivity, why does it leave us feeling so incredibly isolated, exhausted, and adrift?
Yeah.
We're going to explore the tension between building true communities, the kind based on shared rhythms and friction, versus dissolving into what Han vividly calls a digital swarm.
It's just such a powerful phrase.
It really is. And just to frame this for you listening, our goal here isn't to take a political side on capitalism or digital media.
Right, yeah.
We are simply using Han's critique of modern neoliberal society and digital capitalism as a diagnostic tool. We want to put our modern behaviors through his machine, unpack the mechanisms at play, and just see what the image reveals.
Precisely, because Han argues that the exhaustion you feel it isn't a personal failure, it's a systemic feature. He posits that we have traded meaningful shared rituals for the chaotic noise of social media and relentless production.
Yeah.
And in doing so, we've transitioned from a society of communities into a society of isolated, exhausted egos.
So, to you, the listener, I want you to hold this question in your mind as we talk today. Have you ever felt like you are constantly rushing, constantly communicating, outputting data every second of the day, yet entirely disconnected from the people actually around you?
The people sitting right next to you even.
Exactly. Do your days blur into one long, exhausting loop of notifications, optimizations, and life hacks, where Wednesday basically feels exactly like Sunday?
If that resonates, then you're experiencing the exact loss of temporal architecture that Han identifies as the root of our modern malaise.
Okay, let's unpack this, because that phrase, temporal architecture, is where I want to start. To understand why we feel so disconnected, we first have to look at how we experience time itself and what we've lost.
Right.
When Han talks about the disappearance of rituals, he isn't just talking about people going to church less, is he? Because for a lot of people, the word ritual just means like a morning routine. It means journaling for 5 minutes or making a pour over coffee.
No. He's talking about something much more foundational than a personal habit. What is fascinating here is how he defines rituals fundamentally as techniques of temporal architecture.
Temporal architecture.
Yes. To understand this, we actually have to look at space first. Han draws heavily on the French writer Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, specifically from his posthumously published book, Citadel.
Okay, I love this analogy.
Saint-Exupéry writes that rituals are in time what a dwelling is in space. Think about what a house does. A house provides shelter, sure, but it also organizes emptiness.
Yeah, it carves it up.
Right. It creates a living room, a kitchen, a bedroom. It structures the void of space into a habitat.
So without walls, space is just a void. You can't live in a void.
Exactly. Without them, Saint-Exupéry says, the years wear us away and disperse us like a handful of sand. Rituals make the years fulfill us. They structure the passage of time so that we don't just endure it, we inhabit it.
That is a phenomenal analogy. Imagine standing in a massive abandoned warehouse. There are no walls, no rooms, no hallways. It's just an open, endless concrete floor stretching out as far as the eye can see. If you try to live in that warehouse, you don't feel free. You feel a profound sense of agoraphobia.
You feel exposed.
Exposed and lost. That is what modern time feels like without rituals. It's just a vast, featureless, expansive hours. Rituals build the rooms in our time. They create thresholds. They tell you, this time is for mourning, this time is for celebrating, this time is for quiet.
And crucially, those rooms are shared. They aren't just built by your individual will, they're built by the community. When you have those shared temporal rooms, you can finally rest. You know where you are in the timeline of your life and your community's life.
Yes, exactly.
If we connect this to the bigger philosophical picture, Han brings in Hegel's concept of making oneself at home in the world.
Oh, wait, let's dig into that, because Hegel is famously dense, but this concept of being at home is so central to our psychological well-being.
It really is. Hegel's phenomenology often deals with alienation, the feeling that the world is foreign, hostile, or disconnected from our inner spirit.
Right.
To overcome this alienation, we have to recognize the world. And recognition, in a philosophical sense, doesn't just mean seeing something twice. It means knowing something as that with which we are already intimately acquainted.
It's the feeling of walking through your front door after a long trip and recognizing the specific smell of your house, or the creak of the floorboard.
Yes. Rituals provide that specific type of recognition, but in time. This repetition stabilizes life. It creates durability against the chaos of existence.
It gives you a place to stand while the river of time rushes past you.
Exactly. And to ground this even further, Han contrasts this temporal durability with Hannah Arendt's view on the physical world.
Oh, this is a great connection.
Yeah, Arendt, in her book, The Human Condition, pointed out that the durability of physical things, like a sturdy wooden table, a stone cathedral, or a well-crafted chair, gives human life stability in the physical realm.
Because it lasts.
Right. The table you eat at was there before you were born, and it might be there after you die.
No.
It endures even as human moods, biological cells, and entire generations change.
The physical world acts as an anchor.
Yes. Han argues that rituals provide that exact same stabilizing resting point. But for our inner lives, for our psychology, Rituals are the heavy oak tables of time.
The heavy oak tables of time. I like that.
But to build those inner rooms, to construct that heavy furniture of time, we need materials. And Han argues that the materials used to be symbols.
And this is where we get into a profound linguistic history. The origin of the word symbol is so revealing of what we have lost. It comes from the ancient Greek word symbolon.
Right.
Historically, this referred to a very specific physical object used as a sign of recognition between guest friends. It was known in the wider Greco-Roman world as the tessera hospitalis.
The broken clay tablet.
Yes, but let's really think about the mechanics of this because it's brilliant. In the ancient world, traveling was incredibly dangerous. There were no international banking systems, no embassies, no digital passports.
None of that.
If you were a merchant from Athens traveling to Syracuse, you relied entirely on networks of guest friendship, or xenia. So two friends from different city-states would take a clay tablet or a piece of bone, and they would break it in two.
Which creates a completely unique fracture line.
Exactly. The fracture line was completely unique. Each man would keep half. Years later, or maybe even generations later, because this obligation was passed down to their children, someone from the Athenian family could travel to Syracuse, present their half of the broken tablet to the descendants of the original friend, and bring the two halves together.
It's beautiful.
It is. The physical fit of the jagged, broken edges proved the alliance. That is what a symbol literally is. It brings halves together to create a unified whole. It binds people across time and space.
And the power of that symbol lies in its endurance. It isn't easily changed. It isn't easily discarded. It demands an ethical response from the other person. This raises a crucial diagnostic question for our modern X-ray. What happens when a society loses its symbols? What happens when the clay tablets are ground into dust?
We get today.
Han argues that our modern world is entirely symbol poor. We are drowning in data, we are suffocating in information, but data possesses absolutely zero symbolic force.
None.
It does not bind us together. A terabyte of data on a server somewhere does not create a community. We have replaced enduring symbols with fleeting information, and the result is what Han calls a poverty of experience.
Okay, I have to challenge this conceptually, because if you look at modern consumer behavior, we don't seem impoverished, we seem ravenous for experience.
That's true on the surface.
We love new things. We are utterly obsessed with innovation, the latest software update, the new social media app, the trending political topic, the newest Netflix series. Doesn't that massive constant influx of new information give us an incredibly rich, diverse experience of life? I mean, we see more of the world in a single day of scrolling than a medieval peasant saw in a lifetime.
That is the illusion that digital capitalism relies upon. Han would counter that it gives us a highly stimulated experience, but an incredibly shallow one. Let's look at the mechanism.
Okay.
The compulsion of production, which is the fundamental engine of our modern neoliberal economy, forces a constant frantic search for the new. If the economy is going to grow, you must be dissatisfied with what you had yesterday. But this constant search for innovation only produces superficial variations of the same.
Variations of the same, meaning the new iPhone is just the old iPhone with a slightly better camera.
Exactly. Or think about the infinite scroll on your social media feed. It is a brilliant piece of software engineering designed to deliver constant novelty. The next video is always a new person, a new joke, a new outrage.
Right.
But structurally, neurologically, is the exact same experience. You are sitting in the same chair, swiping your thumb in the same motion, receiving the exact same dopamine hit. The content is new, but the form is identical.
What?
The new quickly deteriorates into a deadening routine, which leads to a pathological intensification of what Han calls serial perception.
Serial perception, as opposed to like deep perception.
Yes. In serial perception, we jump from one thing to the next, to the next, to the next, in a desperate search for meaning that we never find. Because meaning requires pausing. Meaning requires the architecture of a room to hold it.
We lose the capacity to linger. This is why reading a dense book feels physically uncomfortable for a lot of people now. Their brains are screaming, next, swipe, next.
Precisely. Without rituals to anchor us, perception is never at rest. We suffer from a collective attention deficit. And Han's critical point is that this isn't necessarily a biological or neurological flaw in the individual. It is a structural, necessary feature of a society that demands we never stop processing the new.
Right, because lingering is unproductive. If you sit and stare at a painting for 2 hours, you aren't clicking on ads. You aren't generating data. So if rituals create structured time and they give us a sense of home, What happens to our social connections when those rituals vanish and we are forced into this serial perception? If time loses its architecture, where do we physically and socially end up? We transition from true communities to what Han calls the digital swarm.
This is one of his most striking and vital diagnoses.
Mm-hmm.
To explain the swarm, he sets up a fascinating historical paradox. In traditional ritualistic societies, you often had deep community without communication.
Community without communication. In a world where we think communication is literally the only way to bond, what does that actually look like?
Think of a traditional Japanese tea ceremony, or chanoyu. It is a highly formalized ritual. Every movement, the folding of the napkin, the whisking of the matcha, the passing of the bowl is completely prescribed.
Right.
There's almost no talking. It is characterized by a profound shared silence. The ritual gesture entirely replaces communicative noise, yet the participants feel a deep sense of unity and shared presence.
So the ritual itself does the heavy lifting of connection.
Yes. Or think of singing in a large choir, or taking part in a solemn religious liturgy. The individual ego, the loud I that wants to express its unique opinion, is temporarily suspended.
You aren't exchanging personal information.
Exactly. You are merging your breath and your voice into a shared rhythm. You have profound community, but very little interpersonal communication in the modern transactional sense.
Okay, I see that. You are bound by the form, by the symbol, and today we have engineered the exact opposite reality.
We have. Today we have hypercommunication without community.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Because social media feels like a community. It was sold to us as the ultimate community building tool. Mark Zuckerberg's whole pitch was connecting the world.
Right.
It feels like the modern town square. We're all there, we're all talking, we're sharing photos, debating politics, sharing memes. But Han strictly refuses to call it a community. He calls it a digital swarm. Why a swarm?
Because the underlying physics of a swarm operate very differently than the physics of a community.
Yeah.
A digital swarm is just a massive collection of isolated individuals.
Isolated, even though they're connected?
Yes. It completely lacks the spirit or the enduring bond that is necessary to form a true we. A true community, historically and philosophically, is not just a group of people who happen to agree with each other. True community requires friction.
Friction.
It requires obligations, enduring commitments, and the willingness to sacrifice your individual preferences for a collective meaning.
Right. Like if you are part of a physical geographic community, let's say a small town or a neighborhood association, you have to deal with the annoying neighbor.
Absolutely.
You have to show up to help sandbag the river when it floods, even if you're tired. You have mutual unchosen responsibilities. The friction of dealing with people you don't perfectly align with is the glue of the community.
Exactly.
But digital networks optimize specifically to eliminate that friction. They optimize for individual convenience and utility.
Exactly. You connect to a group online only as long as it serves your emotional or professional utility. And the moment friction arises, the moment someone challenges your worldview or annoys you, what is the architectural feature of the software?
You block them, you mute them, you unfollow. You simply excise them from your reality.
You curate your environment to completely eliminate anything that challenges you. And this lack of friction, this refusal of the difficult other, leads us to a massive psychological crisis, the crisis of resonance.
Explain resonance in this context, because we usually use that word to mean, oh, that tweet resonated with me, meaning I agreed with it. But Han means something much deeper.
Yes, our modern use of the word is almost backward to Han's meaning. Han explains that rituals historically produce axes of resonance. There is vertical resonance, a connection to the cosmos, to God, or to nature.
Okay.
There is horizontal resonance, the deep bond within a social community. And there is diagonal resonance, a relationship with the physical things of the world. Crucially, resonance implies a relationship with something outside and different from yourself.
Oh, I see. It's just like acoustic resonance. If you play a string on a cello, the string vibrates, but the sound is amplified and made beautiful because that vibration bounces off the wooden body of the instrument.
Yes.
The wood is a completely different material than the string. It provides resistance. If there was no wooden body, the string would just make a thin, quiet ping.
That is the perfect physical metaphor. True resonance requires a different material to bounce off of.
Right.
It requires the resistance of the world. But our digital channels are fundamentally designed as echo chambers.
Right, because there's no wood to bounce off of.
Exactly. Likes, retweets, followers, they do not provide resonance because they don't challenge the ego. They only strengthen the echoes of our own self. When you post an opinion and get 1,000 likes, You aren't resonating with a community, you're just hearing your own voice amplified 1,000 times.
We are surrounded by mirrors, not windows. We look into our screens thinking we are looking out at the world, but the algorithm is just feeding us back our own reflection, perfectly tailored to our specific biases and desires.
The digital swarm is a vast hall of mirrors. We only ever encounter optimized reflections of our own opinions. And here is the clinical part of the diagnosis. Han argues that when true resonance disappears completely, depression arises.
Wait, why? Walk me through the mechanism of that. Why does a lack of resonance equal depression?
Because human psychology cannot survive in a vacuum of the self. If your ego has nothing outside of itself to push against, nothing to ground it, it turns inward. It becomes hyper-aroused.
Hyper-aroused.
Imagine a microphone placed too close to a speaker. It creates an agonizing, screeching feedback loop.
Oh, that awful sound.
That is what the modern ego is doing. It is caught in a feedback loop of its own anxieties and desires, with no external community or ritual to absorb the noise. The ego eventually burns out from its own friction.
And this psychological isolation is just compounded by the literal physical reality or lack thereof of the digital swarm.
Yes, the disembodiment of the digital. We mentioned earlier that rituals are temporal architecture, but they are also profoundly physical. They are bodily performances.
Right, the tea ceremony.
Or when you kneel in a church, when you stand and chant at a protest, when you gather under the old oak tree in the village square, your body is engaged. Rituals create an embodied identity.
Which digital communication lacks entirely.
Completely.
Yeah.
It heavily relies on the glowing rectangle of the screen. It lacks physical presence. It lacks physical vulnerability. And most importantly, it lacks the gaze of the other.
The physical gaze, the sources talk a lot about this. I've noticed this in my own life. If you are arguing with an avatar on Twitter, it is remarkably easy to hurl the most vicious, vitriolic insults imaginable.
Too easy.
You type things you would never, ever say to a human being standing 2 feet in front of you, looking directly into your eyes.
And why is that? It goes back to philosophers like Emmanuel Levinas, who wrote extensively about the face of the other. The physical, vulnerable face of another human being looking at you demands an ethical recognition.
It demands empathy.
Yes.
Yeah.
You see their humanity, their fragility. The screen absorbs and neutralizes that ethical demand. You are not looking at a face, you are looking at pixels. You are looking at data.
So the swarm is loud, it is volatile, it is incredibly reactive. I mean, we see this with digital cancel culture or viral outrage, but it has absolutely no ethical center because it is disembodied.
Precisely. We are hyper-connected, but totally devastatingly isolated from the true ethical presence of others.
Which sets up the next massive paradigm shift in Han's philosophy. Because we are trapped in this hall of mirrors, because we are isolated from true community and true physical presence, all of our energy has to go somewhere.
Right.
And where does it go? It turns entirely inward. And this leads to what Han famously calls the Burnout Society, the culture of self-optimization, and a deeply counterintuitive concept he calls the violence of positivity.
This might be Han's most famous contribution to modern philosophy, actually. To really grasp what he means by the Burnout Society, we have to look back historically and contrast his view with the work of the French philosopher Michel Foucault.
Foucault is huge when it comes to power dynamics. Let's lay the groundwork there.
Foucault famously analyzed the institutions of the 18th, 19th, and 20th centuries: prisons, factories, asylums, schools. He described this era as a disciplinary society. It was characterized by the architecture of the panopticon.
The panopticon, the prison design by Jeremy Bentham, where the guard is in a central tower and all the prisoners are in a circle of backlit cells around him.
Exactly.
The prisoners can't see the guard, but they know they might be watched at any moment, so they end up policing their own behavior.
Exactly. It is a system of external control that becomes internalized. But the key operating mode of Foucault's disciplinary society is the modal verb must or should. It was a regime of prohibition and duty.
Okay.
You felt the oppression coming from the outside. The factory boss tells you what you must do. The church tells you what you should not do. The state dictates the laws. You are disciplined into obedience through the threat of punishment.
So the old order said you must work or you will starve. You must obey or you will be punished. The power dynamic was very clear. The oppressor was over there and I, the oppressed, was over here.
Yes. But Han makes a brilliant pivot. He argues that in the late 20th and 21st centuries, we've transitioned out of Foucault's disciplinary society and into a neoliberal achievement society.
Yeah.
And the defining modal verb of this new society is not should, but can. limitless possibilities.
Yes, you can.
Exactly.
But wait, let's play devil's advocate here. Yes, you can sounds amazing. It sounds like the ultimate liberation from Foucault's prison. It's the slogan of every motivational poster, every sports brand commercial, every tech startup. We tell our children, you can be anything you want to be. How is this a problem?
It sounds like pure freedom, but Han reveals it as a psychological trap of immense proportions. The you morphs seamlessly and invisibly into a you must be able to.
Oh, wow.
Under the guise of freedom, we are subjected to a much more efficient, much more ruthless form of exploitation. It is no longer external exploitation, it is self-exploitation.
It is a genius system, honestly, from a purely cold capitalist perspective. If you have an external boss whipping you to work 16 hours a day on a factory floor, eventually you will realize you are being abused. You will form a union. You will strike. You will rebel against the boss. But if you are the boss...
You cannot rebel against yourself. The achievement subject exploits itself far more efficiently than any external authority ever could, because the exploitation is accompanied by the feeling of freedom. We voluntarily exploit ourselves until we physically and mentally break down, all while believing we are simply realizing our personal potential.
We become what Han calls the entrepreneur of the self.
Yes. You are no longer an employee, you are a brand. You are a corporation of one.
We treat our lives like a startup, where we are simultaneously the demanding CEO, the overworked entry-level employee, and the product being sold on the market.
It's exhausting.
And the terrifying thing is how deeply this penetrates our private lives. We don't even let ourselves rest. Look at the current obsession with biological optimization. We wear smartwatches that track our heart rate variability, our blood oxygen, our REM sleep cycles. My watch literally gives me a sleep score out of 100 every morning.
And how does that make you feel?
If I get a 65, I wake up feeling guilty. I feel like I failed at resting. I am applying the metrics of factory production to my own unconscious state.
That is the most pristine example of what Han calls the violence of positivity. Positivity here doesn't mean being happy. It means the totalizing addition of performance, production, and optimization into every sphere of life.
Even sleep.
Even sleep. There is no negativity, no gap, no useless time allowed. Every aspect of life, even hobbies, must be incorporated into the logic of production. You don't just bake bread, you start a sourdough side hustle.
And the result of this internalized pressure cooker is the burnout phenomenon.
Which is why burnout and depression are the signature illnesses of this era. They are not the result of a virus. They are not caused by an external sovereign oppressing us. They are caused by autoaggression.
Explain autoaggression.
In the disciplinary society, aggression was directed outward, at the boss, at the state. In the achievement society, because you are your own master, when you inevitably fail to meet these limitless, impossible standards of continuous self-optimization, who do you blame?
Yourself.
You can't blame the system because the system told you that you could do anything. So you blame yourself. You turn your aggression violently against your own psyche. You feel inadequate, worthless, and exhausted.
You don't start a revolution, you just get depressed. You withdraw.
Precisely. The exhausted subject is entirely harmless to the capitalist system. In fact, their exhaustion fuels whole new industries. And this brings us to the ultimate irony of the modern wellness industry.
Oh, this part of Han's critique is so sharp it cuts. Let's talk about the colonization of wellness.
Let's look at practices like meditation, mindfulness, or yoga. Historically, in their original religious and ritualistic contexts, these were practices designed to transcend the ego. They were designed to help you realize the emptiness of worldly attachments and desires.
They were paths to liberation from the material world?
But in the achievement society, they have been entirely stripped of their original symbolic and spiritual context. They've been colonized by capitalism and turned into productivity tools.
Right.
You don't meditate to achieve spiritual enlightenment. You meditate using a subscription app so that you can lower your cortisol levels just enough to endure another 60-hour work week at your high-stress tech job.
Right. You practice self-care so you can recover quickly and get back to the grind. We treat self-care exactly like a NASCAR pit stop. Change the tires, refuel, and get the machine back on the track as fast as possible.
We are essentially performing maintenance on our own biological machinery to ensure we remain optimal producers, which leads Han to coin the term psychopolitics.
Contrast that with Foucault's biopolitics, right?
Right.
Foucault talked about how the state managed the physical bodies of populations, birth rates, public health, physical discipline.
Yes. Han argues that capitalism has evolved past biopolitics. It doesn't just want your physical labor anymore. Machines can do physical labor. It now wants your interiority. It wants your emotions, your desires, your fears. This is psychopolitics. Our feelings are raw materials. They are harvested as data points to feed algorithmic advertising.
The sources refer to this as emotional capitalism.
Because today, we consume emotions rather than things. Think about how products are marketed. You are buying a shoe, you are buying the feeling of athleticism. And often, this consumption is disguised as morality.
Explain that. How is morality consumed?
Han critiques the phenomenon of modern ethical consumption, buying fair trade coffee, ocean plastic shoes, or signaling your politics through brand choices. He argues that in the achievement society, this is rarely a genuine communal act of solidarity. Instead, it operates as a narcissistic badge of morality.
Is virtue signaling via the credit card?
Yes. We consume the feeling of being a good person. The moral value is credited to our personal ego account. It's a way of optimizing our self-image. It allows us to feel righteous without actually having to engage in the difficult, structural, friction-filled work of systemic political change. We just buy the right coffee and feel optimized.
So, to summarize the X-ray so far, we are exhausted, we are treating ourselves like human capital, we are trapped in a feedback loop of our own egos, and we are completely obsessed with our own emotional and moral optimization.
That's a grim picture.
This totalizing self-focus is clearly destroying our mental health. But according to Han, it does something even more tragic. It actively destroys our ability to love and connect intimately.
And this brings us to one of the most poignant aspects of his work, the disappearance of the other and the resulting agony of Eros.
Let's define terms first. When Han talks about the other with a capital O, he isn't just talking about another human being standing next to you at the bus stop, is he?
No. In philosophy, particularly in the tradition of thinkers like Emanuel Venus and even Hegel, the other represents that which is fundamentally distinct, foreign, mysterious, and ultimately outside of your control. The other is that which you cannot consume or assimilate into your own ego.
It's the friction we talked about earlier. It's the realization that the universe does not revolve around your perception.
Exactly. True experience, Han argues, arises essentially from the negativity of the distinct. We need an other to challenge us, to disrupt our routine, to pull us out of ourselves, and to transform us. If you only ever encounter things you already understand and agree with, you never grow. But our modern society of limitless positivity and algorithmic curation is systematically erasing the other.
We see this so viscerally in our technology. I mean, think about visual culture and selfie filters. We literally use algorithms to smooth out our pores, change the shape of our jaws, and widen our eyes, conforming our unique faces to a universal algorithmic standard of attractiveness.
We erase our distinctiveness.
Yes. We erase the bumps, the scars, the asymmetries that make us human. Han has a chilling phrase for this. He calls it the hell of the same.
The hell of the same. Everyone looks the same, thinks the same, consumes the exact same curated aesthetic on Instagram or TikTok. We are terrified of anything that breaks the smooth, frictionless surface of this optimized reality.
And we do it with media, too. The Spotify algorithm is designed to feed you music that sounds almost exactly like the music you already listened to. It actively prevents you from experiencing the friction of a challenging new genre that you might initially hate, but which could eventually expand your soul.
Yes. And when you apply this avoidance of the other to romantic relationships, the consequences are tragic. True love, what Han calls eros, is not just a warm, fuzzy feeling. Eros requires encountering a profound mystery. It requires a massive risk. It requires surrendering your autonomy to something completely beyond your control. It demands a protected space of hiddenness and vulnerability where two distinct people can slowly, hesitantly reveal their inner worlds to each other.
But look at the architecture of digital dating. Let me push back slightly on Han here, or at least play devil's advocate again. Before dating apps, you were limited to the people in your immediate geographic vicinity, your town, your church, your college. Doesn't Tinder or Bumble theoretically expose us to millions of others we would never have met otherwise? Doesn't the scale of the internet increase our chances of finding eros?
It increases the scale of contact, but it fundamentally alters the nature of the encounter. Han argues that dating apps operate on the exact opposite logic of eros. When you open a dating app, you are not encountering a mysterious Everett. You are reducing potential human partners to standardized profiles. We evaluate human beings using the exact same cognitive muscles we use when shopping for a toaster on Amazon.
We filter them. We set our parameters, must be over 6 feet tall, must have a master's degree, must vote a certain way, must like hiking.
Exactly. We demand compatibility scores based on data. Why? Because data provides the illusion of safety. In the burnout society, we are already so exhausted that we cannot bear the thought of emotional friction. We are seeking to avoid injury, vulnerability, and the terrifying unpredictability of the true other. We don't want a partner who will challenge us or shatter our ego. We want a partner who is basically a reflection of our own desires, an accessory who will optimize our life and fit seamlessly into our existing brand without disrupting it.
We want the positivity of companionship without the negativity of passion. The sources note Han's critique of our like button culture. We have been neurologically conditioned by social media to only seek positive reinforcement.
And falling in love is not always positive. Historically, poetically, falling in love is often described as a kind of injury. The very phrase is falling. It implies a loss of footing, a loss of control. It shatters the boundaries of your ego. But today, falling in love is seen as too risky, too negative. It is an emotional injury to be avoided. Love is reduced to a frictionless business transaction where we swipe left and right, trying to match our perceived sexual market value with someone else's.
It's incredibly bleak when you frame it that way, but it makes terrifying sense. If you view yourself as a brand, a partner is just a brand collaboration. You want a merger that benefits both stock prices. And to ensure a good merger, you demand total transparency. Which brings up another massive issue Han tackles in his Critique of the Digital Age, the tyranny of transparency.
We live in an era that worships transparency. We demand it from politicians, corporations, and our intimate partners. We believe that if we know everything about someone, their location data, their browsing history, their past mistakes, their text messages, we will be safe from deception.
Right. If you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear. It's the ultimate modern mantra.
But Han makes a brilliant counterintuitive argument here. He states that the demand for total transparency is fundamentally totalitarian. It destroys the very fabric of human intimacy. Complete transparency doesn't create trust. In fact, it makes trust completely obsolete.
Wait, how does transparency destroy trust? That sounds backward.
Think about what trust actually is. If I know with 100% certainty everything you have done, are doing, and will do, I don't need to trust you. I have data. I have proof. Trust only exists when there's a gap in knowledge. Trust requires stepping into the unknown and choosing to believe in the other person anyway. It requires a leap of faith over the abyss of not knowing.
So by demanding total data visibility into our partners' lives, we are trying to engineer trust out of the equation because trust is too emotionally risky.
Precisely. By demanding total transparency, we eliminate the hiddenness and vulnerability that is the absolute prerequisite for genuine intimacy. You cannot have intimacy under the glare of a surveillance spotlight. A relationship without mystery, without the protected space of the unknown, is not a romance, it is an audit.
Wow, an audit. That hits hard. So what does this all mean for the way we actually live out the timeline of our lives? It seems like our lives lose their overarching architecture. We lose our story. And this leads us to the crisis of narration and what Han calls the poverty of experience.
To understand the crisis in narration, Han draws heavily on the brilliant cultural critic Walter Benjamin, specifically his essay, The Storyteller. Benjamin wrote this in the 1930s, but it's more relevant now than ever. Historically, storytelling wasn't just entertainment. It was a fundamental way human beings organized time and meaning. A storyteller created community. They passed down wisdom that was deeply tied to physical, lived experience.
And a story has a specific architecture, just like a ritual.
Exactly. Crucially, a story possesses an inherent truth and closure. A story has a beginning, a middle, and a definitive end. The ending is what gives the preceding events their meaning.
But today, the narrative architecture is being entirely replaced by the architecture of information.
Yes. And information operates fundamentally differently than narrative. Information is purely additive. It has no depth, no overarching arc, no inherent meaning. We are bombarded every second of the day with data, tweets, short-form video reels, and info bites.
And because it's just endless addition, it never resolves. A social media feed has no ending. It is specifically designed as an infinite scroll. It just piles up endlessly.
Which leads to a cognitive state that the sources call information fatigue syndrome. Our analytical capacities become completely paralyzed. We are so deluged by data points that we lose the ability to synthesize them, to distinguish what is actually important from what is trivial noise. We have access to all the knowledge in human history, but we understand almost nothing about our own lives.
We know exactly what is happening in a political scandal on the other side of the world minute by minute, but we don't know our neighbor's name. And we have so much data about our own biological lives, too. Going back to the health apps, we track our steps, our REM sleep, our caloric intake, our heart rates. Han refers to this quantified state as bare life.
Bare life is a powerful concept. It means life reduced entirely to its biological functions and survival metrics. We are meticulously, anxiously maintaining the biological machinery of our bodies, but we have no overarching narrative to tell us why we are walking those 10,000 steps. What is the story of our life? What is the purpose of the health?
We want to live longer, but we don't know what to do with the time. Without a narrative, life becomes just a sequence of transient, disconnected moments. Which brings us back to the loss of rituals, specifically the loss of rites of passage.
Rites of passage were the ultimate narrative tools. They provided profound psychological closure. They moved us from one defined phase of life to another. You were a child. You went through a rigorous, often frightening ritual that involved a symbolic death of your childhood self, and you were reborn, recognized by the entire community as an adult.
There was a threshold. You crossed it, the door locked behind you, and you couldn't go back.
Today, because we've dismantled those thresholds in the name of continuous, frictionless production, we never truly transition. Look at how extended adolescence has become. We just age as continuous consumers, adopting different aesthetics, but never really crossing a communal threshold into mature responsibility. We lack the forms of completion that give a human life its shape.
And the digital realm makes this lack of closure even worse, specifically when it comes to memory and grief. The sources highlight a really haunting idea from the concept of the digital realm as a place of the undead.
It's a deeply unsettling but accurate metaphor, because in the digital world, data does not rot. It does not decay. A physical photograph will eventually fade and crumble, but a JPEG is immortal.
Right. Old photos, past comments, pictures of ex-partners, memorials for people who have passed away. They don't fade into the background of memory. The algorithm actively resurrects them. You wake up and your phone sends you a notification. On this day, 5 years ago, look at this memory. And it shoves a perfectly preserved digital artifact of a past life into your present morning.
It actively prevents the natural, necessary decay of memory. And memory needs to decay for us to heal and move on. Forgetting is not a bug in the human operating system. It is a vital feature. If a past relationship or past trauma is perfectly preserved in amber on your Instagram feed, you are denied the finality of grief.
You were denied the ending. You were haunted by digital ghosts. And as Walter Benjamin noted, it is the ending, the knowledge of death and finality that gives a story its meaning. Without closure, without the ability to leave things behind, we are trapped in an eternal, superficial present.
An endless, exhausting loop of the now.
Okay. We have looked deeply at the X-ray. We have diagnosed the illness. It is a grim picture. We are a society choking on our own hyperproductivity, deafened by the noise of the digital swarm, burned out from relentless self-exploitation, and isolated in our narcissistic, algorithmic echo chambers. We have lost the architecture of time, the mystery of the other, and the narrative arc of our own lives. The prognosis looks pretty devastating. So, where's the hope? How does Han suggest we cure this? How do we reclaim our humanity?
This is where we move into the final and perhaps most challenging aspect of his philosophy: reclaiming the contemplative life. Han argues that we need to urgently revive what ancient philosophers called the vita contemplativa, the contemplative life.
To balance out the vita activa, the active life, which has completely devoured our entire existence.
Exactly. The active life is about doing, producing, achieving, optimizing, communicating. It is necessary for survival, yes. But if that's all we do, we become mindless hamsters on a wheel. The contemplative life is about the profound power of not doing. And this isn't about escaping reality or being lazy. It's about reclaiming our sovereignty and our attention from the grip of cognitive capitalism.
Which means we have to face something that modern people find truly terrifying: deep boredom.
It sounds trivial, boredom, but historically and psychologically, it is profound. We flee from boredom today like it is an apex predator. The second we have a free moment, standing in line at the grocery store, waiting for a bus, even sitting on the toilet, what do? We reflexively pull out our smartphones. We cannot tolerate even 30 seconds of unstructured, unstimulated time.
Because in the achievement society, unstructured time feels like wasted capital. It feels like a failure to optimize.
But Han, drawing on thinkers like Nietzsche, argues that deep boredom is the only psychological soil from which genuine creativity, deep thinking, and authentic desire can grow. If your brain is constantly stimulated by external inputs, you are only ever reacting. You are just a node in a massive stimulus response network.
You are just processing other people's data.
Exactly. It's only in the silence, in the uncomfortable void of deep boredom, that you can actually hear your own thoughts. It is only when the noise stops that you can discover what you genuinely desire, rather than what the algorithm has conditioned you to desire. The mind needs fallow time to regenerate, just like a field needs to lay fallow to restore its nutrients.
We need to learn how to linger again. We need to stop the serial perception. And part of lingering is changing how we experience joy and how we celebrate. The sources draw a really sharp, illuminating contrast between modern events and traditional festivals.
Yes. An event is a hallmark of the active life.
Yeah.
It is consumerist, it is contingent, it is a spectacle, and it is ultimately tied to production and consumption. You buy a ticket, you consume the experience, you post a picture to prove you were there, and then you move on to the next event.
It's transactional.
A traditional festival, however, is an entirely different architecture of time. It is sacred, fundamentally unproductive time.
Like capitalism has colonized the festival, think about Christmas or Thanksgiving or Halloween. They are no longer sacred pauses. They are the most intense retail seasons of the year. The pressure to buy gifts, to consume massive amounts of food, to perform the perfect, aesthetically pleasing holiday for your social media followers, it's exhausting. The holidays often feel like the most productive, stressful work we do all year.
Which means they are no longer festivals. True celebration requires the absolute suspension of economic activity. It's a time that doesn't pass in the sense of a deadline approaching or a clock ticking. It is a time that stands still. It's an intentional interruption of the everyday where the community gathers not to produce anything, not to optimize anything, but simply to be together and recognize their shared bodily existence.
So, on a practical individual level, how do we push back against the digital swarm in our daily lives? If we can't instantly rebuild these communal festivals, what is our personal defense mechanism?
Han suggests that the ultimate resistance in the 21st century is the rebellion of silence. In a world that ruthlessly demands constant communication, constant output, constant hot takes, and constant visibility, choosing to close your eyes and embrace silence is a radical political act. Silence is the degree zero of production.
It's a refusal to feed the machine. Choosing to keep a beautiful, intimate moment hidden and choosing not to post it for validation. Choosing to linger on a single, difficult, dense book instead of scrolling through hundreds of 280-character hot takes. Or simply choosing to sit on a park bench and stare out a window without a podcast playing, without a purpose, without tracking your heart rate. These aren't acts of laziness. They are acts of profound resistance.
They are the tools by which we start building walls and rooms back into the vast empty warehouse of our time. They are how we begin to make ourselves at home in the world again, not as exhausted producers, but as contemplative human beings.
Wow. This has been a heavy, necessary X-ray. Let's synthesize the journey we've been on today in this deep dive. We started by looking at how the loss of temporal architecture, the disappearance of deep, shared rituals, has left us adrift in an endless expanse of empty time, desperately chasing the new, but only finding the same.
We saw how that loss of ritual structure pushed us out of true, friction-filled communities and into the volatile, disembodied echo chambers of the digital swarm.
We unpacked the insidious trap of the achievement society, how the freedom of yes you can morphed into the tyranny of self-exploitation, leading to autoaggression, burnout, and the colonization of our very emotions by psychopolitics.
And we explored the tragic cost of this optimization, the erasure of the mysterious other, the reduction of romantic love to a transparent, risk-free transaction, and the loss of narrative closure in our lives.
We are overinformed but deeply impoverished in our actual human experience. But the takeaway for you listening right now is not a message of despair. It is a call to awareness. True community and true connection cannot be built through algorithmic matching, likes, or endless notifications. A genuine human life requires the friction of obligation. It requires the patience of deep attention. And it requires the courage to let others be truly other, mysterious, flawed, and outside of our control.
It requires us to step out of the surveillance of the digital panopticon, to log off, and to step back into the messy, unoptimized reality of physical presence.
So, as we close this deep dive, I want to leave you with a challenge to mull over, something to anchor everything we've talked about today into your physical reality.
Tomorrow, or maybe even later today, you are going to feel that familiar, itchy, neurological urge to fill a quiet moment, waiting in line, sitting at a red light by pulling out your phone to check a feed. When you feel that phantom itch, stop.
Just stop. Keep the phone in your pocket. What if you deliberately created a completely useless ritual for yourself in that moment? A small piece of temporal architecture that cannot be monetized, that cannot be tracked by a health app, and that cannot be shared online for validation. What might you discover about yourself or the physical world immediately around you in that unbroken, unoptimized silence?